Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are going to be doing a recent reads, which is a little bit different format for my wrap-ups than normal, because I decided that I probably should not try to do end of month wrap-ups because I am not low-key about them. I am very high-key. Basically, even if I told myself that it could be posted whenever it's ready, I know that deep in my soul, I'm going to feel like I should be posting it within a couple days of the end of the month. And since that's not low-key, that's not the vibe we're going for, I'm going to try to do it this way instead. And so when I have like 4 or 5 books to talk to you about, I'll come and film one of these videos. And we're just going to try it out. So since I last posted my May TBR, I have finished or DNF'd actually 6 books. We're going to see how many we're going to get through in this video. But the very first one is The Mental Load, a feminist comic by Emma. And this is exactly what it says. It's a feminist comic. It's a nonfiction comic that I believe was started as a web series. So I think, like, if I'm correct, Emma was posting these to the web in 2016 through 2018, and then in 2018 some of them were gathered up and published in this book. I did read the translated version, so this was originally written in French, but I don't read French, so I read the translated one. And this is something I picked up on a whim from my library. I was in the general vicinity of that particular part of the nonfiction section. I saw it. I was like, oh, I want to learn more about the mental load. I know some, but I don't know a ton, so I'd love to deep dive into this. And what I will say is that meant that my expectations were not great, because I was hoping it would be about the mental load, and this is much more just a feminist comic, which is okay, but not exactly what I was looking for. And that's kind of my experience of this book, which is just, this isn't quite for me. It's good, just not anything that I would have otherwise picked up. The comics themselves, let me see, it's kind of like this. So it doesn't really add a ton to the conversation, but it doesn't detract either, which is fine. I think it just is one of those things that is. But there were 2 things that prevented me from really connecting with this. And one is that there were a couple of issues that were discussed that I was not super up on and didn't specifically relate to me a ton because they were more specific to France. So, I'm over here, my American self being like, okay, I'm sure we have a version of this issue in America, but not the one specifically talked about. And the other thing that kept me from connecting to it was that this just feels really dated. So I'm pretty up on feminist conversations, and so I have a lot of general knowledge, and so none of this felt new to me. It's much more of a primer, and that's not my level anymore. And so while I think it was good, ultimately, if I had kind of known what exactly it was, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But because I do think it was still pretty good, I did give it 3.75 stars. And then I finished All Systems Red by Martha Wells, the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. So this is an adult science fiction novella series where we follow our main character of Murderbot, who is an AI of sorts and it has some biological components, but definitely puts itself more in an AI kind of category. But essentially in this book, they have hacked their governor module, which is the little thing that gives it orders that it has to follow. So it doesn't have to follow any orders, but it is with a group of scientists on a scientific exploration when all of a sudden an unknown fauna animal type thing attacks the group, and now Murderbot has to make a decision whether it is going to follow the orders being given by the governor module and allow the humans to die, but it is protecting itself so nobody finds out that it's hacked its governor module, or it can do the actual correct steps to save the humans, but then run the risk of being found out. And then the story goes from there. I love this series. It is one of my favorite series. This is probably the 5th or 6th time that I've read this book in particular. And so my thoughts and feelings really haven't changed since, I last reread it. Basically, the pros of this series are that Murderbot is an utterly relatable character. Like, they really just want to sit and watch TV rather than, do their job, which, yeah, I get. And just their observations on the humans are really, really fun to read. Second, I think that it has a great, action-adventure kind of plot feeling to it. I think Martha Wells did a great job writing this as an action-adventure book. I do have a couple of cons, the first being that for me, there was not enough world building. Now, I will say the caveat is I love world building, and so I want a lot of world building in my books, and this really just has the bare minimum. It has enough to keep the story going, but nothing more than that, which is, I want more. So, yeah. And then the other con that I have is a little bit more general, not me specific, and it's just that there's too many characters. We have our primary characters of Murderbot and Dr. Mensa, and that's all fine, but there's a lot of secondary characters in the form of these scientists on the expedition. And like I said, I've read this 5 or 6 times now, and I still can't name all of them, and I sure can't differentiate them. And that's just not great. So, yeah, there's just too many characters. But what I will say is that neither of those things really hindered my enjoyment, so I still like reading it, and it is still a book that is somewhere between 4 and 4.25 stars for me. And then I picked up I finished The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho, and this is an adult wuxia fantasy novella where we are following our main character of Guet Im, who is a nun, and she joins a group of roving bandits, and the story goes from there. And this is a really interesting novella. I think that Zen Cho does a great job with description in this. The author just gives 2 sentences, and I feel like you really get a feel for the room that you're in. And I think that the interplay between the characters is just really fun to watch. I think Guet Im as a character is really, really interesting and just generally well done. The only major con that I have with this book is that it feels like there's a larger message, and I wouldn't know though because I didn't get it. This is the second time I've read this book, and I haven't gotten it either time. I get to the end and I'm like, I feel like there's something more, and I just don't have it. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. I still really enjoyed this book, but I mean, I do feel it did lower my rating simply because I do feel like maybe I'm not getting something. Now, I did reread this because I had read this originally, and then I found out that there was a conversation happening within the trans community, and I didn't remember all the things that they were talking about, so I wanted to read it for myself. And what I will say about that conversation, not spoiling anything, but there is a character in here that can be read as trans. And if you read them as trans, and especially if you were told that this character was trans, there is a scene at the end where they're dead named and misgendered, and just how the scene plays out is, I would understand that being incredibly hurtful, how it just kind of goes down. It's just generally really uncomfortable. Now, I did say they can be read as trans because it's actually pretty gray area. There are other reasons that this character could have made the choices that they did, and it's not answered in the text. So there's no actual definitive answer within the text. And so when I read it, I didn't actually read this as a trans character, which is why I didn't have the same number of problems. When I got to that scene, I still was uncomfortable, but I don't think that I was as hurt as other people were when they got to that scene. So that's what I will say. There is a character that you could read multiple different ways, and depending on how you read it is gonna like inform how you feel about that particular scene. So just a heads up. But I still really enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it 4.25 stars. And then I DNF'd Big Dirty Money by Jennifer Taub. And this is an adult nonfiction about white collar crime. And I was listening to it on audio, and I got to like 15% or about 50 pages in, and I was having some struggles because there was this thing that was misrepresented. And it was basically that the author asserted that vaccine hesitancy came about because of our mistrust in the pharmaceutical companies. And I was sitting there like, I mean, yeah, that's in there, but that's not the only reason. There's like also this culture of like purity culture and not adding chemicals into your body. There was also a bunch of people that looked around and are like, why am I getting vaccinated against these diseases that no longer are around? And it's just like, okay, but like they're not eradicated. The measles is just not really getting spread a lot. It's not eradicated. We all still have to get vaccinated. And then of course there was the paper that is absolutely debunked that linked autism to vaccines. And that's like just the ones that I have off the top of my head. So it was like, I mean, it's in there, but it's not the only reason. But I was like, you know what? I'll keep going. I'll keep trying. And I got to 30% or about 100 pages in when I was just like, I just don't like the writing style. I don't like that I can hear that there's like exclamation points being used in ways that I don't appreciate. Like just how the author is conveying the message. But also what I found is that there were a lot of numbers and like stats and dates. And there just wasn't quite enough pausing between these numbers to give context. So all of this is a balance, right? You have to give context so that people understand what these numbers mean, what these dates mean, the point you're trying to convey. And I recognize that there may have been context given after I stopped, but for me, the balance was wrong. I needed the context a little bit sooner. And so I just wasn't enjoying reading it, so I DNF'd it. And then I finished What If by Randall Munroe. So this is additional serious scientific answers to absurd hypothetical questions. So this is an adult nonfiction series of essays where it's literally that. People send in absurd hypothetical questions, and Randall Munroe uses great science, like the best science that he can, to answer those questions. And I love that premise because it's just, we're so used to seeing science being used in really sciencey, very serious kinds of ways. And Randall Munroe is like, no, I mean, we can have fun with science too. Let's have fun. And that's really what these two books are about. And I love that. However, while I liked reading this, I didn't love it as much as I loved the first one. And what I will say about that is that the writing style changed just a little bit. And the questions that were being answered just didn't appeal to me specifically as much. So, for example, one of the questions is, rubber tires on millions of cars and trucks start with about a half an inch of tread and end up bald. Rubber should be everywhere, or at least our highways should be made thicker. Where's the rubber? And that's one of the questions in here. And I love that we go in depth on the science of it. But again, that's not a question that necessarily appeals as much to me as like some of the questions that were in the first one. I still think it's great. And it's especially great if you have like a preteen or a teenager who is really curious and like into science. This is a great book for them. But I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Still liked it. And I still would absolutely pick up a third one if a third one is written in this series. And then the last book to talk about real quick is Escaping Exodus by Nicky Drayden, which is the first book in a adult science fiction series. And essentially we have two main characters, and the first one is like the daughter of the matriarch, and one is like a worker, but essentially they all live on like this little teeny tiny spaceship. And when they're on the spaceship, like half of the people in their colony are like in stasis, and what they do is they go hunt down these space animal things that are really, really big, and they basically become a parasite and colonize these animals. And one animal can hold the whole colony, and they like you like gather up all the resources of this animal until it's depleted after about 10 years, and then they go back on their ship and they find a new one. That's the basic idea for this book, which is really interesting, but I did not think it through and how I was going to have problems with some of the body horror of this animal and colonizing this animal, because like I got into the first chapter and I was like a little bit yucked out, not gonna lie. And what I didn't know going in is that we start with our main character as a teenager, which is not my cup of tea. So I know that there's time jumps in this, so this character probably ages up. But when we start with her, she is a teenager. She just started her period. So like, you know, mid-teenager. And I don't like YA for a reason, and one of those reasons is I just don't want to be with a teenage main character. So that was not great either. What I found is that like I was just skimming. By the time I was like, I don't think this is for me, I started skimming and I was just like, no, it's not for me. So I DNF'd it after 27 pages. But that's it. Those are everything that I've read and DNF'd recently. So what is on the docket next? Okay. So I am a third of the way into A Court of Mist and Fury, but that had to go back to the library because it was overdue. So I put myself back on the holds list, and I'm hoping that I get to it soon. If I do, or like it comes in pretty quickly, and if I do, I'm gonna focus on that because I don't want it to go overdue again. Otherwise, the only other thing that I know that I'm probably going to get to is The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older, and because mostly because this is another library book that I don't want to go overdue. After that, though, I have no idea. We'll just have to see what happens. I've got a huge list to choose from, so I don't know. We'll see. But that is it. So if you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please leave me a comment down below. But that is it. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!